Welcome to Smart Muslimah podcast. Inshallah, if you find this podcast episode useful, please subscribe and tell your friends and family about Smart Muslimah. Also, good news, I have a newsletter, and that's how we can stay in touch. To subscribe, please go to smartmuslimah.com. Details are also in the podcast notes. In the newsletter, I'll be sharing my book recommendations, productivity tips, and online courses that I've created, and also information about a new book that I'm writing called Smart Single Muslimah. Inshallah, it will help you to transform the way you approach love and relationships. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Farhat Amin, and today, as you know, this whole season is about love, marriage and relationships. And alhamdulillah, I've got a really well qualified guest today. Her name's Najwa Awad, and she's going to be discussing the issue of, how once we become wives and then mothers, some of us, and this may not apply to everyone, but I've heard this quite frequently, that we can end up losing our own identity. And what do I mean by this? That what we do is we start concentrating so much on our kids, their education, their studies, their hobbies, that we sign them up to classes, that we can then start to neglect ourselves. Now this, taking interest in your kids, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and putting your energy into kids isn't a bad thing. However, when it can then start affecting our marriages, because so what we're going to be talking about today is that we do things like we stop taking care of ourselves, and we don't realize we start spending less time with our husbands, and that can then kind of snowball into us feeling a bit dissatisfied with this life that we've then created. So okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Najwa before I bring her on. So she is a psychotherapist. She's got a private practice in US. And she alhamdulillah, she's very passionate about helping Muslims heal, grow and thrive after going through an adversity. She's been doing this for over a decade, so mashallah, she has a lot of experience, and she does this online and in person. And she's alhamdulillah, she's a writer and a fellow at the Yaqeen Institute. And the way I found out about her was a YouTube video I watched of hers. So assalamu alaikum, Najwa.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well. How's your day been so far?
Pretty hectic. Usually the days I work, I'm balancing the kids and work and all kinds of other house stuff now with the pandemic. So alhamdulillah, I'm really glad to be here today.
Alhamdulillah, yeah, because I know it's early in US at the moment where you are. And so yes, I really appreciate it. And I genuinely think that the listeners are going to find what your advice and your experience, inshallah, really useful. So let's begin really. So you heard what I said about the topic. Is this something that you've come across? Is this something that wives and mums are saying to you?
Yes. Well, actually, my private practice is mostly for women. So this is something that I hear all the time. It really is a big struggle being able to balance just everything that it takes just to be a woman these days. But then when you throw in work and you throw in kids and being married, in-laws, sometimes it can feel like a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so therefore it's not, to feel this way it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, isn't it? It's quite normal to feel like this then.
Yes, it's a very common thing. I think it might feel overwhelming for some people, whereas others, it can be a great sense of fulfillment having all these different roles. It's just a matter of balancing it so that one particular role doesn't take over all the other roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would you, if a sister came to you asking advice, what would be the first thing that you would speak to her about then regarding this issue?
So generally, when someone comes to me, I love to be able to hear all about their lives, because um, it's crucial to be able to understand all the different components that someone has, and no two women are alike. So first, I want to know, what does she have on her plate? Because you can't really talk to someone about balance, about prioritizing, without having that discussion. And sometimes women don't even realize how much they have on their plates. They might say, okay, yeah, I have my husband and kids and maybe work. But then when you talk to them further, they might also be going to school, or they might also be doing PTA. That's the parent teacher uh, association here. So they might be doing like stuff for their children at school. They might be in some kind of neighborhood association. And so it's not that they have like 2, 3 roles. It turns out maybe sometimes they have 5, 6, and it's no wonder that they're overwhelmed. So one of the first things I like to do is talk to them about, like, what are your roles? What is the most important role to you, or what are the most important roles, so we can prioritize those and make sure that you are progressing in the way that you'll be satisfied when you're older, and inshallah, when you look back, you're like, okay, I'm glad that I had put these things in order. I'm glad that I was able to spend time on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because I'm thinking when my kids were young, it was actually ridiculous the number of things I was doing, and
Yes.
and I just kept doing, and I'd volunteer for stuff, and I don't know why. And when I think now that I stopped doing it, I can't believe I, like, all those, literally all those things. I was the PTA. I was a governor at the school, and I was a teaching assistant at one point, and I was doing my uni degree, and I was thinking, like, but where do you think we get that idea of that we have to be so busy, otherwise we're lazy?
Well, I think, mashallah, may Allah bless our ummah, Muslims are very good at volunteering for things. So may Allah continue to bless us in that way. But I think that, women, they just take on things. And I don't know if it's, fear of disappointing people and saying no, or that, this is one more thing I can take on. This is one more thing I can take on. But the reality of it is that we're very limited. Even CEOs of big companies, I think, it was Mark Zuckerberg and a few other people, they were saying that, at any given time, whoever you are, you can only really focus on a few aspects of your life. And this is like, someone who I'm assuming is wealthy, has a lot of help, around the house, even with his wife. So if you have someone with that much on their plate saying, it's just not realistic for you to do everything, I think that really puts things into perspective. And, I think sometimes we feel bad saying no to other people when they ask for something. But,
Yeah.
picking and choosing, it really makes a big difference in how satisfied we are at home. And I think that translates to other aspects of our lives. And then also people start to respect our time too, that they know, okay, Najwa is not going to do this every time we ask, because she has other important things. And then they can go on, and then they can ask different people, involve different people in the community. And then that makes everybody more well-rounded when the work is more evenly distributed.
Yeah, that sounds really good, because then, if so, how would, I guess, your priorities, what should decide our priorities then, as Muslim women?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great exercise that I recommend for people to do on their own, because it might look different for different people. But even recently, you know, working from home with the pandemic, and even having my 4 kids, it's been a lot. So even for me, I've been getting out like my Google Docs, or sometimes I do it on paper, and I'm like, okay, what are my priorities here? And so personally, I like to look at it is that I like to make sure all my religious obligations are first, that I put Allah first. And then to me, and there's debate here. There's a lot of debate here online whether you put your kids first or your husband first. So for me, I put my husband first, because I think that relationship, by having a good relationship with your spouse, it'll affect your kids, and then my kids, and then my work. And so when I look at it that way, and on the days that I feel overwhelmed, then I'm like, okay, like, if I don't do this thing for work, or maybe I forgot this thing at the office, it's not that big of a deal. If I prayed my daily prayers, and I connected with Allah, and I was, a good wife and a good mom. That's really what is important. And then some days, you might not be a good mom. But when you focus on, like, alhamdulillah, ultimately my relationship is with Allah, and that's the first and foremost thing, because He's the most forgiving, unlike everybody else.
Yes.
Sometimes our kids might be disappointed, or our spouse, or the people you work with. But ultimately, if you prioritize Allah first, I think everything naturally gets easier from there.
I think that is such a lovely list. And I wish a long time I had known, a long time ago I'd known that, because once that did click, and once that does click in your life, things fall in place. Because it's so weird how when you're chasing the money, and like thinking, if I work really, really hard and I volunteer to do extra classes at school and do, you're right, your head of department, your manager, they'll never be happy. They'll think, oh yeah, I'll get her to do more work then. And it doesn't, you don't get, that's so true. If you're not connected to your creator, there's something missing. And then you feel guilty, when you don't,
Mm-hmm.
when you miss your salah, when you miss your, your dhikr and things, then you feel guilty and you think, and the thing is, you're right, it's quite easy if we get our priorities straight. And no one's saying it's going to happen overnight, but if you start with the intention, isn't it? And then make the effort.
It all starts with intention. It really does. And being mindful and purposeful with your time. It's so easy with everything going on to forget the order of priorities or what you have. And that's why I continuously like to go back to that list, even if it's just, sometimes just 4 or 5 bullets. It helps keep that perspective.
Yeah.
There's this one exercise that I learned way back before I was, I think, even licensed. And it was a exercise I saw in a book. And it was so powerful. It was talking about, if you could fast forward your life when you're in your older years and you were to look back, or even, take it a step further and say, after you have passed, how would you want to be remembered? What are the things that you would have wanted to accomplish in your life? And I think looking back that way is one of the best ways to prioritize, because right now we're in the middle of it, right? We're in the middle of that, of everything. And it's hard to see long term. But when you go back and be like, okay, when I'm 80 years old, what would I have wanted to do? And then, you might think of things that you didn't even think. I would have wanted to travel with my kids. I would have wanted to do this thing for my neighborhood. I would have wanted to do a program for the masjid. And that perspective, it was still so eye-opening. And it's an exercise I continue to talk to people about and continue to do myself to help me, focus on everything going on in my life.
Now that's very interesting that you bring that up, because I've spoken to a number of basic people my mum's age, so they've lived their lives, and then and when they have looked back, and they're not happy, that and what they've said is that all I did was cook and clean and take care of the kids, and I dedicated all my life to my in-laws, my husband, and my kids, and I didn't do anything for myself. And now the kids have gone. They're traveling, they're studying, they've moved away, and I felt so sad when I heard my auntie saying this. And that's, and so in a way I was thinking that they, alhamdulillah, a lot of them, mashallah, they did it for Islamic reasons, and then some cultural reasons as well. But they didn't. When you don't, what would you say when someone, a mum or a wife, she then doesn't do anything for herself? How would you? And then she's feeling like that. What would you say to her?
Well, earlier on or later on in life?
I don't know. I guess there are people who, like, it's interesting. Like, I'm thinking of the aunties I know who've said that to me, and their life, they're now older, but then there are young mothers who, it's this side affair of missing out, or that their life has changed now. Before they could go out, and their time was their own time, their sleep was their own sleep. They could eat with their food when it was warm. They weren't eating their kids' leftovers, and then they're saying, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. I didn't know I was going to lose my own life, basically. And I don't like this life I've got. And it's quite honest of them to say that to me, actually.
Yeah, and that's a very sad feeling to have,
Mm,
feeling that you've kind of lost yourself and where you are in life. And so, I'm so glad you're doing a podcast on this, because it's really, it goes to show you the importance of us prioritizing ourselves. I don't know where this comes from, but just this tremendous sense of guilt, that mothers feel so guilty about
mm,
doing anything for themselves. And I don't know if it's like a societal messages or things that have been passed down from generations before us. Um, but that guilt and then putting needs last, I don't know where it comes from, but it's very destructive. And it doesn't even make sense when you think about it. The whole analogy with the airplane, that if the airplane is about to fall and you have the oxygen mask that falls down, if you go and you try put it on somebody else first, what's going to happen? You're probably going to pass, you're going to run out of
mm,
oxygen and pass, and then you won't be able to help whoever you were trying to help.
mm.
Whereas if you take that oxygen mask and you put it on yourself first, then you will be in a better position to help all the people around you. um, and so subhanallah, like, being able to take care of yourself, you will be able to take care of others in a much
Mm,
better way. But it is a very sad thing, and I've heard that. And
mm,
it goes back to also having a good relationship ultimately with Allah too, because
yes,
everybody else will leave you. You
yes.
kind of come into the world alone. Ultimately, you go alone. On the day of judgment, you're probably going to be standing alone. And so it's you know part of our duties to take care of our children, and to be a good spouse, to take care of our parents. But a lot, I don't see anywhere where he tells us to do that first. First and
Mm,
foremost, we
mm,
worship him. And on the day
right.
of judgment, it's good to go back and say, I took care of my kids, I did all this stuff. But if you missed your salah because you were with your kids, or you didn't prioritize some of your own religious goals and spiritual needs, then it's it's pretty lopsided, isn't it? In
Yes.
that you've really put things around where the primary reason that we're here is to worship Allah and to work on our spiritual selves.
Hmm. Yeah, because I do see, maybe because I'm as a teacher, and what is because I do tuition, and then so I get a lot of parents who they're they're spending their money, time, and this is before they'd drop them to me, but now it's all online. But there's this culture of we have to spend our money and time on our kids, and then and so they're ferrying them around from one club to another and to tuition, and and then these are mums who they won't do any sports themselves, or like, and then mashallah they're sending them to Quran class, to Arabic class, but then they're not getting to go to any kind of Islamic course themselves. And that, and I think this is where we've got it upside down, that our kids don't need to do, if we're doing so many things with them and neglecting, like you said, our own spiritual development, that's not good. I remember listening to a talk, and Bob was saying that, you put your kids into madrasa and stuff like that. Are you putting yourself, if your kids reach a higher level than you, that's
Right.
not, where's that? You should be the same. Why can't you be the same? Um,
Right.
but yeah, so it's okay. So now what the other thing then tends to happen, this is about connects to the idea of doing too many things. Um, Women will say, I have this all the time, I don't have enough time. I just haven't got the time to do, because now that I'm a wife and a mum, um, I just have, if I don't do all this stuff, it's not going to get done. And there isn't enough time in the day. But I must admit, I don't really know what to say to friends who say to me that they don't have enough time.
Well, time is very limited. I think, even probably lost some barakah in our time too. But yeah, I mean, time is something that is very limited, and the more you kids you have, I feel like the worse it gets. But the truth is, um, there's always ways to manage time. There have been people before us who have had more things on their plate, and they were able to manage their time effectively. It's very important. I mean, like, going back, it is very important to take care of our kids. I mean, I don't want people to get the wrong idea of like,
Yes,
oh, putting ourselves for. It's very important to put them in activities and to do all these things, but it's not going overboard,
yes,
because
exactly.
you know, subhanAllah, I've had kids in my office, you know, where their parents bring them in because they're anxious. And when I ask them about their day, they're like, oh, well, I have you know, Girl Scouts on this day, and I have piano on this day, and I have soccer on this day. And I'm like, okay, how is it that a person spends all day in school and then has these activities and their mental health is okay? And now, you know, in addition to all of these activities, now we're throwing mental health in the mix because we're overextending ourselves. But going back to prioritizing and managing our time effectively. One of the things I like to do personally is just like to make a list of all the things I need to get done for that day, and for that week. And that helps me, you know, stay on track in terms of the things that I want to do. I was also listening to a video last week or the week before, and this guy had this wonderful exercise in terms of like staying on top of you know, your priorities and the things that are important to you. And he said, you know, once a week, write down those things, you know, those areas that are important to you, whether it's like friends or work or whatever, marriage, and then rate yourself for that week.
Oh, okay.
And then, you know, reflect on, you know, are you satisfied with the grade that you gave yourself? And if not, you know, come up with one or two things in that area that you can do for the next week or so. So for example, if you we're talking about like how physically fit you are, and you know, you rate yourself a D. I didn't do anything this week and I ate donuts like three days out of the week, for example. Then you would say, okay, well, you know, I'm going to go for a walk, for a stroll, you know, 2 times this week, or I'm going to go work out or whatever. Or, you know, I didn't have the best week with my spouse, you know, we didn't connect at all. So I might be like, okay, well, maybe we'll have date night this week. It's something about, you know, giving yourself a grade that is, I don't know, it's much more profound, because I did it last week and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't do as well as I thought I did. But it does put things into perspective.
That's good, because you're not going around. And also what I like is that you're not complaining to other people and moaning. You're assessing yourself, you know, and
Yes.
then being honest. Like, because what's the point? You can't lie. What's the point lying to yourself? And yeah, and then doing, because that's the kind of, I think, you know, how the Prophet ﷺ said that, you know, do good deeds regularly. Like there's a lot of wisdom in just making small changes, realistic changes, and start getting into good habits. There's that really good book, have you heard of it, Atomic Habits?
I haven't. I should check that out.
I can't remember the guy's name, so bad with authors' names, but it is this idea, you basically make small changes. So like that little exercise you explained, that would be a very good little exercise. Your value, like we say to our, you know, students, you know, self-assess your work. They're never honest, by the way, when they're but yeah, with this exercise I can see there being a lot of honesty. Yeah, alhamdulillah, I think I'm definitely going to try that.
You know, and another thing that I had read several years ago, when I was just kind of feeling defeated, you know, it's hard having kids and managing everything. And there was this one woman, I don't know if she was a blogger, but she said something that really stuck with me. And she said, you know, in a woman's life, progress is not always linear, that we have a lot of plateaus, and that's totally okay. So for example, say you're working, and then you have a kid, and so your priorities change. And so maybe with your career, you kind of flatline a little bit. And then, you know, maybe your child gets older and then you work some more, you're able to advance in your career, and then you plateau again. But the point she made is that those plateaus, you're not going back down to zero. You are just, you're going up, you're flatlining a little bit, but you're maintaining. And just that maintaining by itself is progress, until, you know, you're able to find the time or to be able to get back to what it is that you want to do. And when I looked at it that way, subhanAllah, like it's completely different than maybe how a man would work his career. But if you stay consistent and you do those little things, you know, just whatever industry that you're in, if you just stay consistent, you do a little thing here or there, once a month, whatever, twice a month, you'll find yourself, you know, continuously making progress when you look back. So I really love that idea of just doing little things, whether spiritually or for your career, or even for your kids. sitting down with them maybe 5 minutes every day probably has a tremendous impact on the relationship you have with them, or if you're doing, reading or whatever. Doing small things in small increments consistently is really a big deal.
Yeah, you're definitely, and I think starting the younger the better. I think with children, if you get into those good habits at a young age, because then once they turn into teenagers, there's a big transformation, and it's a bit hard to like do a U-turn, unfortunately. So okay, great. So then now, if we could just focus on marriage in particular, that how once the kids come along, that how can we like this, like you mentioned date nights, but I guess it's more about a mentality. I think that you said that if you prioritize your relationship with your husband, that can then help, because I think this is something I hear a lot, and I experienced it myself, that your energy and you just, whether it's taking care of your own health, and then you're getting less sleep, and then making an effort as far as your looks. Once you get married and you're tired with the kids, that can really kind of be, you start to think that's not a priority anymore. But would you say why should we make it a priority?
We should make it a priority because it's important, but also men do it too. I was talking to a client a month or two ago, and we were just talking about like the difference between men and women, because I hear this a lot, in that when men want to do something, when they want to work out, or they want to get a haircut, or they want to go to the masjid, they don't say, okay, I have to get my housework done, I have to do this, I have to do this, and then I can go get a haircut. They just go get a haircut. But subhanAllah, women, we say, okay, I have to do the dishes, I have to do this with the kids, I have to do this. By the end of the day, there's no space. So it goes to the next day. And so they put themselves at the end of the list. And I don't know where that comes from either. But, it is important for us to work out. It is important for us to take care of ourselves and to meet our friends. Sometimes I guess there isn't that much point in reflecting on why we do the things that we do when we don't know. But we know that there is a problem in that we place our needs last, and that's something that we need to bring back, because number one, it's important for our own selves, but two, we're modeling this behavior for our kids. And then three, as Muslims, we wait forever, not forever, but we wait such a long time to get married. We're and we're so, I can't wait to get married, and I planned for this day forever, and then like 2-3 years into it, like you've kind of
we're walking around in our pajamas,
right? And the spouse is important. I mean, inshallah, they're your lifelong partner. So this is a long, this is someone you're going to be spending the rest of your life with. And so when you take care of yourself for yourself, right, or even for the sake of Allah, sometimes, then that's attractive, and that's something that your spouse is going to like. And then when they like you, they're going to be nicer to you, and when they're nicer to you, you're going to be nicer to them. And then ultimately, that's the relationship we want our kids to see, and that's the relationship that we've waited for, as children and teens and early adults. And it affects the relationship a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what if then? Well, some might say, well, my husband doesn't bother, so why should I bother? I've heard that enough times.
Well, aren't you worthy enough to do it for yourself?
Yes, exactly.
right, because you are important, and that goes back to us valuing ourselves, to take care of ourselves, honoring ourselves. These are blessings that Allah gave us. If He gave us the means and the body and then all that, and the ability to put on fine clothes, why wouldn't we respect some of these blessings and reflect it on ourselves?
Yeah, that's it. I think there's a lot for for us to think about. I think we shouldn't just go into autopilot. I think that's not good. If we need to keep thinking, and if there is a problem, and every marriage has problems, these are going to be constant ups and downs, but question is, what are we going to do about it? It's easy to just ignore it, but that's not going to solve the problem.
it's so easy to settle into a routine. You know, it just, with everything going on, it might almost feel comfortable. And sometimes even like, you know, we might grow up in certain households and we're like, well, I'm never going to be like my parents. And then you're, you know, 20, 30 years later, you're exactly like your parents,
Yeah.
you know. But novelty, you know, it has a very profound effect on relationships, and you know, trying new things with your spouse can actually be a great way to revive the relationship. Even going back to the whole idea that we were talking about, where just doing small things consistently, you know, kissing your spouse before they go to work, that takes probably like 1 or 2 seconds, you know, or hugging them. I heard that, I think there was research on that shows the how like relationships get much better just if you hug the person every time they leave and they go. You know, small things like that are make such a big difference in relationships.
Alhamdulillah, that's really nice. So tell us a bit about your accounts. You've got a counselling website. It's amanacounselling.com. So inshallah, if sisters would like to find out more about what you do, is that the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, they can, you know, go on amanacounselling.com. I put stuff on Instagram, Therapy with Najwa, and some things on Facebook as well. But you know, yeah, that's a great way. I on my website I have a bunch of videos posted up. And yeah, motherhood and marriage, those are some of my you know, favorite topics, because it's just, I see it every day. And it's funny in that I see women from all different kinds of walks of life, you know, from different countries, different religions, different age, and subhanAllah, we all have some of the same issues. And it goes to show, you know, when we are vulnerable with each other and we talk to each other about these things, then we realize that we're not alone. And especially these days with social media, everybody tries to be perfect, and it's so detrimental to us as women, even as Muslimin, because then we have this image to protect, and then nobody opens up to anybody. And so I really think getting support from women, or even older women sometimes, you know, having those role models, those mentors is so important for us.
Yeah, so because I think what's nice about your counselling service, it's I don't know, maybe there are many Muslim female counsellors who will give advice from an Islamic perspective, but you know, I think that's really important. If you're going to, you know, if you want help and advice, we should go to someone like yourself who's grounded in, you know, the prophetic tradition, and will give advice that won't contradict Islam, because there's so much bad advice for mothers and bad, like, you know, if I'm just thinking kind of movies where they encourage them, yeah, go out, you know, go out, you should go out and go and live your life, go and get drunk, go and have an affair, go, you know, it's all that nonsense, and they make it look so good, but that doesn't bring happiness.
No, it doesn't. No. And yeah, and so finding someone who shares the same values as you really does make a big difference. And, you know, I'm glad you actually brought up the counseling piece, because something that I feel like is not really talked about is postpartum depression, you know, and some of the rates, they go up to as high as, like, they estimate that 20% of women have postpartum. And I think this is very relevant to our conversation, because if you get married and then you have a kid and then you have postpartum and you don't even know it, then, you know, the way you're interacting in your marriage, the way that you're interacting in life, the way you're interacting with your kid, sometimes can be a result of that depression. And then when it's untreated, then you have a second kid, a third kid. And so your whole identity, your whole life at that point has kind of turned, and you didn't even realize it. And so I think it's good for women to reflect on, you know, am I having some of the same issues as other women? You know, we all have issues. Or is it deeper than that? Because if it's deeper than that, then, you know, getting that help is very important for you. You're definitely worth it. But you're going to see that it has a trickle-down effect into your marriage. If you're depressed, how would you, I mean, it's going to be much harder for you to connect to your spouse. It's going to be harder for you to want to dress up. It's going to be harder for you to want to have a relationship with anybody. So if the underlying issue is depression, you know, that's something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for pointing that out. Okay, then Jazakallah khair, inshallah. So I hope you have the rest of your day goes well.
Thank you.
again, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to come on and sharing your advice. So Najwa's website is amanacounselling.com. I'm going to put the details in the kind of podcast info as well. So definitely check that out. Okay, then take care, Najwa, and inshallah, maybe we'll speak again soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for having me. Wa alaikum assalam.
This episode is brought to you by farhatamin.com, a website that specializes in Islamic stickers, Muslim activity books, as well as Ramadan and Eid decorations. Wholesale and reseller inquiries are also welcome. So visit farhatamin.com today.